Sing, Chapter 19. Sing, Sweet Nightingale. Your Grace? Ella addressed Gran. She sounded like August remembered, and she moved with the same poise as she had last night. August stepped forward before recalling where he was and hiding again. He wanted more than anything to clutch her hand and ask her why he hadn't remembered her as Lady Tremaine's stepdaughter, though he had a terrifying, wonderful suspicion. Your Grace, please wait, she cried and hurried down the stairs. May I try it on? But mostly, painfully, August needed to let her see this through, because there was a dark suspicion unfurling in his mind that Lady Tremaine was about to be exposed, and he wanted to watch. Lady Tremaine huffed. Pay no attention to her. It's only Cinderella, said Drizella. Cinderella? August pressed his lips together to keep from shouting. From the kitchens, said Anastasia or Drizella, and they couldn't keep speaking over each other. She's out of her mind. A scullery maid, continued Lady Tremaine, ignoring that Ella was her stepdaughter. She tried to block the Grand Duke from reaching Ella. Yes, just an imaginative child. That made the Grand Duke square his shoulders and pull himself up to his full height. Madam, my orders were every maiden, he said, and swept past her to offer Ella his hand. Come, my child. He escorted her to a chair and gestured for the footman to bring the glass slipper. August leaned over the railing, eager to see Ella thwart the Tremaine family, and gasped. Lady Tremaine slid her cane out and tripped the footman. The shoe tumbled from the pillow. It shattered before Ella with a heartbreaking clatter. Oh no! The Grand Duke fell to his knees and covered his face with his hands. No, oh no! He tried to gather up the pieces. Oh, this is terrible. The king! What will he say? What will he do? Lady Tremaine sneered down at the entire scene. The smugness radiating from her stance made August's blood boil. Perhaps if it would help, Ella said gently. The Grand Duke waved her on. No, nothing can help now. Nothing. But you see, said Ella, pulling out the second glass shoe from her pocket, I have the other slipper. Lady Tremaine's face distorted in horror. August laughed into his arm to prevent being discovered and ducked back slightly. He would have to reveal himself soon, but he so wanted to know how Lady Tremaine would try to get out of this one. She had been digging her grave for a while, and it was more than deep enough. She was petty enough to keep shoveling, though. The Grand Duke placed the slipper easily on Ella's foot. August grinned. Now that he had found her, they needed to get their memories back. Since she hadn't recognized him at the ball, she must have forgotten him too. He had thought it so unlikely, but working together to investigate the memory loss would explain how they had gotten close. He had seen the same bond form between Martin and Oliver. But 5 days to fall in love? August couldn't believe he would fall in love that quickly, though he still felt as if he were missing something. You little thief! Lady Tremaine shoved past the Grand Duke and pinned Ella to the chair with the cane tipped in her shoulder. Who did you steal that shoe from? Madam! The Grand Duke leaped to his feet. Unhand her this instant. Forgive me, Your Grace, but you're not familiar with her deceptions. I took her in after her father died as a kindness, and she has repaid me with robbery and willfulness, said Lady Tremaine. She didn't dig the cane into Ella's shoulder or raise her hand, but Ella flinched as if hit. Then she braced herself. August gripped the railing. Ella grabbed the cane. I am not a thief. I didn't steal anything, and I have never stolen from you. 5 days must have been more than enough, because he was falling in love with her all over again right now. Do you see what I have put up with? This girl cannot be the lady from last night, because she is not fit for public. If she was at the ball, then she stole the dress and shoes from some unfortunate soul after I banned her from attending for trying to sabotage my daughter's dresses, said Lady Tremaine, and she glanced at the Grand Duke. His Majesty will appreciate are saving his son from such a horrible criminal. I'm not a criminal, Ella snapped and pushed the cane aside. I didn't steal anything. You're the one who destroyed my dress. Hush, Lady Tremaine said. You've committed a terrible crime, Cinderella. I'm trying to help you. Cinderella. August shook his head. This was too much, and Ella shouldn't have to deal with it alone. I doubt that, Lady Tremaine, August said as he descended the stairs, and everyone turned to stare at him. The Grand Duke and my father might not recognize the girl I met last night, but did you really think I wouldn't? Did you think that I would only look at the slipper, see that it fit, and not look at the face of the person wearing it? That I wouldn't speak with her? He would have been insulted if he weren't so angry. Your Highness, Lady Tremaine dipped into a low curtsy. I wasn't aware you were here. That was by design, he said, and glanced back up the stairs. Imagine my surprise when I came to speak with you and heard sobbing from the tower room. Ella stiffened in the chair. Lady Tremaine opened her mouth to speak, and August held up his hand. Making her first smart decision, she stayed silent. Ella, he asked softly. August knelt before the chair and laid a hand over hers. Do you mind explaining what happened last night? It's going to be very difficult to believe, she said, staring at him as if she would never be able to look away again. August squeezed her hand and studied her just as desperately. I have quite the imagination. I was going to wear my mother's dress to the ball, but it was damaged, she said, and August knew she meant by Lady Tremaine. I was outside wishing I could go, because I wanted one night to have fun, a night when I didn't have to worry about anything at all. I didn't wish it aloud, but she came to me. A fairy granted you a wish, he said, and smiled. That only happened when someone good was in great need. Preposterous, Lady Tremaine said. No fairy would grant her a wish to attend a ball. That's exactly the sort of thing one would do if the wish was for happiness, August said. Ella smiled at him and squared her shoulders. She said I had to return home by midnight. That was when the magic would wear off, and I almost made it. Everything she had transformed with magic returned to what it had been before. Everything except the slippers. It's a gift to remember the wish by. They always leave one, August swallowed. Ella must have been kind beyond measure to earn a wish, and it made him want to know her all the more. Ella, I believe you. I remember you from the ball. Last night was perfect. She grabbed his hand with both of hers and said in a breathy whisper, I didn't realize that I thought you're the prince. She said it with a disbelief and reference he didn't like, but her smile didn't falter. I thought you were another guest, she said, blushing. I didn't realize you thought that until you were leaving, or I would have mentioned it, he said. I'm not the Ella you met last night, she said. She was a dream. She seemed very real to me, and I quite like this Ella before me now, August said, leaning in so that only she could hear him. I'm not always how I was last night. She laughed. I'll keep that in mind, but I like this version of you too. From behind him, Lady Tremaine made a disgusted noise in the back of her throat. And between you and me, whispered August, I think we've met before. Ella's mouth opened slightly, and he nodded as realization widened her eyes. Do not think I have forgotten you, madam, August said, rising and pivoting so that he was between Lady Tremaine and Ella. Do you know what's curious? That such a well-educated prince has been taken in by a scullery maid, she asked. That you haven't asked me why I was on my way to speak with you, but wasn't part of this procession, said August. Lady Tremaine arched a brow at that. The Grand Duke had taken a few steps back and watched him with interest. Anastasia and Drizella were glaring at Ella, then her feet, and then her again. August pulled out the glass lily brooch. You gifted this to Lord Moreau, the Baron of Ghent, he said. Yes, she said. Forgive me, Your Highness, but I don't understand why this matters. Is generosity a crime? It matters because this is stolen, said August. Oh, how terrible, she said with all the appropriate affectations of shock and horror. But given the conversation, she was far too nonchalant. However, I'm afraid I still don't understand. Natalie identified you as the person she purchased stolen items from, and she said you had her remake them so they wouldn't be recognizable when sold, said August. You will say, of course, that she's lying. That's fine, given her account books, and I'm sure yours, once we see them. There is more than enough evidence to detain and question you for the theft of items off the Fresno Memorial alone. Natalie even used a special notation to mark the money she paid you when she sold the remade items. The Grand Duke looked as if he had swallowed every lemon in the kingdom, and August wished that Martin were here. How dare you, Lady Tremaine shrieked. Your Highness, I have always respected the royal family, but to sneak into my home, accuse me of lying about my maid, and then this? It's nothing more than speculation and slander. It's unheard of. The Grand Duke cleared his throat. It is quite unheard of, Your Highness. So was memory loss, and someone stealing from a cemetery, and yet here we are, August said. You stole the items from the memorial and sold them to Natalie, and in exchange for her silence, you didn't raise her rent. If there is evidence of such theft here, it's surely because of her, said Lady Tremaine, gesturing at Ella. You cannot believe this nonsense about a fairy. She's my maid, and a poor... Stop saying that, Ella said, and swallowed. Then more loudly, stop calling me that. Stop acting like I'm nothing to you. Lady Tremaine's eye twitched, but she turned to August instead of addressing Ella. This girl is clearly unable to discern real life from dreams. And you think a girl who would not hesitate to steal to attend the ball and then lie about it wouldn't steal from the memorial? Stop it! Ella launched herself out of the chair. She planted herself next to August, her arm pressed against his. She trembled with each word. I am not your maid. I am your stepdaughter, and we are standing in my father's house. You have always dismissed me and used me, but no more. I won't have you leave a stain on his legacy by doing something so foul as stealing from a cemetery and blaming it on me. The estate may be falling to pieces, but you will not ruin his memory. You ungrateful clod, spat Lady Tremaine. You dare question me? Deprive my daughters of their birthrights? Your father cost me everything. August raised an arm to step between Ella and Lady Tremaine again, but Ella pushed him aside. She laced their fingers together and squared her shoulders. What I find curious, said August, is that you don't even need the money. So far as I could tell, you could afford to keep this estate up and running like normal quite easily if you wanted to. He had seen as much from her estate books. So why bother with all this? You could? Ella asked softly. You said I was helping. You said the family needed help. I did, snapped Lady Tremaine. He left everything to you, and the moment you come of age, I shall have nothing. Ella reared back and whispered, You thought I would give you nothing? So you stole to prepare for the encroaching loss of funds, said August. You overcharged Natalie and robbed a cemetery. The woman glanced between him and Ella and whispered, Prove it. I shall take my chances at court. I do not believe for a moment she didn't steal those shoes. Good things come to those who work for them. Our mother would never. Drizella lunged forward to stand between her mother, voice pitched with disbelief. It's Cinderella. It's always Cinderella. The Grand Duke stared at her. Always her doing what? You know, everything wrong, said Drizella, deflating a bit under his gaze. But on purpose. She dropped the breakfast trays this morning. Be that as it may, it's not a crime, said August. I am sure all of this can be solved easily, Lady Tremaine.
Can you fix this? No, this part.
It can't be fixed, sweetie.
Why?
It's a clip. It goes on something. Show us the books for the estate so that we may compare what Natalie paid for the pieces with your income. August squeezed Ella's hand, and we could compare the handwriting to determine who documented the income, of course. Lady Tremaine tensed. I will do no such thing. Mother, tell them, Drizella cried. She ruins everything. Show them. She's never stolen, muttered Anastasia, but Drizella shouted over her, Mother! August inclined his head toward Anastasia, and Lady Tremaine sniffed. I will not stoop so low as to be forced to reveal my financials in such company, said Lady Tremaine. But you will trip a man and break the glass slipper? August asked. You will cast aside your stepdaughter and use her as a lady's maid so that you can hoard money? Lady Tremaine, I did not come here to investigate you. The evidence will speak for itself. Now, about your daughters. They had nothing to do with it, she said quickly. You will not speak with them. They are children. Drizella's eyes widened. Mother? Even Ella looked shocked by the words. It was basically a confession. A loud rapping at the front door cut off anything else she might say. Everyone glanced at the door, and then Anastasia and Drizella glanced at Ella. August nearly laughed. They expected her to answer the door now. A bit uncertain, the footman the Grand Duke had brought with him opened the door. Martin and Oliver stood on the doorway, the former holding a small journal. Oliver stayed a step behind him, and Martin bowed to the Grand Duke and August. He smiled at Ella, too. You got my message? August asked. And came as soon as possible, Martin nodded. I went back over the records for the estate as you asked. You were right. The income reported doesn't match up with what it should be based on what Lady Tremaine collected in rent from her tenants. Lady Tremaine paled, and August smiled, giving in to pettiness for once. Excellent, he said, and cocked one brow at her in an attempt to match her constant look of disdain. Lady Tremaine, care to explain that? She opened and shut her mouth, but the only sound she could make was a croak. I think we have heard enough, madame, said the Grand Duke. Sir Tremblay, if you could assist me. No, no, Cinderella, Lady Tremaine cried, and turned to her stepdaughter. This is a family matter. It should stay in the family. Please, your father would hate for you to do this to me. Ella's expression hardened, her eyes becoming ice. I don't think it's me who my father would hate right now. You are lucky that I shall work toward forgiving you, but I shall not lie to the court for you. I shall not forget what you did to me, despite the fact we are family. She glanced at her stepsisters and frowned. Or what you've done to them. To them? Lady Tremaine reared back. I have done everything for them. Leave them out of this. Drizella nodded, but Anastasia bowed her head, hands clasped behind her. Anastasia, Oliver said, voice soft and slow, you should go upstairs and pack for yourself and your sister so that you can travel to the city with your mother. Can you do that? She looked at him blankly, and Ella quietly said, Your traveling bags are under your beds. Anastasia scurried up the stairs and dragged the stunned Drizella with her. Oliver sighed. I'll go get the accounts, he said, and gently touched Ella's shoulders as he passed. The study. Stepdaughter? Thank you. She nodded and flushed. I'm sorry I never told you. Don't worry about it, said Oliver. But we're friends, Ella, so don't hesitate to ask if you need help. He raced up the stairs after Anastasia and Drizella, and Ella seemed to take in what had happened. She blinked and swayed, and August wrapped one arm around her waist. I'm glad you came back to talk to her, Martin whispered to August as he went to help the Grand Duke escort Lady Tremaine outside. I know it will be tough with her having forgotten you, but you'll both get through it. It was the confirmation he had been waiting for, and all his old fears of loving someone and losing them felt so dull and insignificant now that he knew he had survived it with Ella. They had forgotten each other completely and loved each other the very moment they met again. Ella, he said, holding her close, are you well? She was pale and drawn by smiling. This is impossible, Ella said. She collapsed on the steps of the house, her house, and watched the Grand Duke and Martin help her stepmother into the carriage. I've had dreams like this, but I always woke up before she was taken away, or I kissed the prince. Well, if it will make you feel better, we don't have to kiss and can take her departure fully. August sat down next to her. You're not alone. You don't have to be alone ever again if you don't want. If you need my help, you have it. She laughed then. There was no questioning the affection burning through his veins, and it flourished when she laughed. He would forget her every day of his life and fall in love over and over again if it meant he got to hear her laugh like that. She sighed and leaned against him, hair tickling his nose. Then she whispered, What did Martin mean about me forgetting you? Did he mean like the rest of Fresno forgetting people? Because my memories of the last week are a little fuzzy in places, and I don't know why I spent so much of it investigating with Martin. See, I remember investigating with him alone, said August, and he pulled a handkerchief from his pocket. He dabbed at the tear streaks still shining on Ella's cheeks, letting his fingers linger along her jaw. Her cheeks warmed against his hands. I don't have any memories of meeting you until last night, and I trust Martin with my life. If he says we met, then I believe him. I don't have any memories of you either, and if you were here to investigate, I would have met you. Ella reached up and touched his face. Hard to think I could forget you. That's my line, he muttered, and she laughed. It does imply that we were taken with each other. In love, Your Highness, she said. It means I loved you, and you loved me. And even if that were true, I love you now. She tilted her head back, smiling up at him. There were no glass drops glittering in her ears, and her hair was tangled from her time in the tower, but it was her. Slowly, August leaned down and pressed his mouth to hers. She responded as if it was the most natural thing in the world and curled a hand around the back of his neck. The kiss was sweet and soft, chasing away all his thoughts like a warm summer breeze. He pulled away, kissed her lips lightly again, and said, I love you. And then, like the morning sun burning away a fog in his mind, he remembered everything.